Hello and welcome to the multiplayer section of my Half-Life 25-year anniversary retrospective. Of all the games I worked on over 26 years at Valve, Half-Life was the most physically and mentally taxing for me. Half-Life 2 was no walk in the park either, but Half-Life 1 was the most intense 18 months I can remember. There were just 23 of us on the game team, and the pressure from various directions, the schedule, my mum dying 4 weeks after I arrived at Valve, moving across the world with nothing but 2 suitcases, getting to know everybody while pulling together this big game with little sleep and no life out of the office to speak of. That was a time I was happy to never repeat again. As you can imagine, getting to work on multiplayer maps was such a blessing for me, since it was a return to the world I was so familiar with. So prior to joining Valve, I'd been building multiplayer maps for years. It all started in Doom, which I had played for countless hours when we discovered you could connect 2 computers with a serial cable and play in the same game at the same time. It was a mind-blowing concept. My brother Milo and I connected our computers for the very first time with a ridiculously long serial cable, and despite the incredible latency, I was utterly mind-blown to see Milo's movements on his computer showing up in the game on mine. It was a concept we'd never seen before, and I don't know how this happened, but somebody shot somebody else accidentally perhaps, and then instantly this sort of primitive instinct kicked in, and it was all-out war as we ran around the map, getting more and more drawn into this hilarious contest of bloodlust, revenge, and unbridled joy, and killing each other with the various weapons that until then we'd only used on mindless creatures. I remember thinking, this is a quantum leap forward for games. Suddenly the enemy that I was playing against thought, acted, and reacted like I did, and that changed everything for me. Early on in those Doom mapping days, Milo and I had a group of friends who would get together most weekends for a LAN party, which is basically where we'd put our computers in our cars, drive them over to somebody's house, and connect them for deathmatch games. Remember, this was before the internet, so, well, it wasn't before the internet, but it was before we had internet gaming. And the only way to really connect was to physically drag your computer to somebody else's house. Anyway, those LAN parties were such hysterical fun, and not just valuable as a way to playtest and get feedback on what we were working on, but also just added fuel to our obsession with playing the game. When Quake was released in the summer of '96, we hit the ground running and immediately started building real 3D deathmatch maps, which was an amazing release of the restriction of the 2D environment that Doom had. In fact, one of the deathmatch maps I built for Quake ended up as a Half-Life deathmatch map. I'll come to that later. I've always thought of building multiplayer maps as designing a playground. Imagine you can build exactly the adventure space you want as a kid to run around inside of with your friends and play your favorite games in. It was exactly that kind of excitement that drew me to Doom Deathmatch map design in the mid-90s, and continued to the very last multiplayer map I built for Valve 29 years later, which was Hellfire for Team Fortress 2. Okay, so that's a little bit of history of me and multiplayer maps, and just a quick timeline here before we get started. January 4th, 1998, that was the first talks of Half-Life Deathmatch in Valve. April 24th, 1998, after a few weeks of working on Zen, I switched to building multiplayer maps, the first of which would be Subtransit. So let's take a look at that map first. Okay, here we are. Wow. I have not seen this map in a very long time. So, what I remember from this map is it was, from when I started building this, it was ready for playtesting in 6 days. So the geometry was created pretty quickly. At least the first revision of geometry. And in fact, this was the room that I started building in. So a lot of times when I'm building a deathmatch map, I will get an idea in my head, and either it's going to be a gameplay idea, which in this case would be, hey, there's a train track and somebody can drive the train around and then plow through other people who are busy fighting one another and then claim the kills on their kill count. So I thought that would be pretty cool. That's something we'd never done in deathmatch before. But this map began with that thought and this space in mind at the very beginning. For whatever reason, I thought of this space. I don't know if it was just one day it popped in my head or it was a dream or something. Don't remember, but I do remember this is the very beginning of this map. And if you know what I'm going to do here. If I no clip out of this, if I come up here, you can see that this room is... Ooh, we have a nice red background. So you can see this is the central part of the map that everything else was built around. It's very slow movement, but yeah, you see this center area is a hub that everything else is connected to. So I began building this center area, and I wanted to run the train all the way around this center area and come back. Yeah, there you go, the track runs all the way around here. So this is how I started this map. I always try to think of interesting places to put the tactical weapons and the items in the map, and that includes ammo, armor, health, and stuff. I never want to just sort of have them in the middle of a corridor where you're running and you just sort of pick up, well, never, but most of the time. I want to make it somewhat a thought process as to where you're going and why you're going there. In this case, you don't really want to walk backwards along here because you're much slower, but if you do, you get this reward, which is the rocket launcher, and a really great place to use it from. And then you can escape fast this direction. But the great thing is that once you're up here, you know that anybody else trying to get to the rocket launcher is going to have to walk slowly because these are both running in the wrong directions, and your exit is pretty quick. So you basically feel like you've won that space when you get to the rocket launcher, if you get there without any trouble. Okay, so this was a pretty active area in this map. And I wanted this area here to be pretty active, so I put some good weapons here because I wanted to maximize the chance that people would get hit by the train as they were jumping around here. And every area needed an incentive to visit that area, otherwise people just would not use that part of the map. So every time I had an area that was perhaps not a corridor between two main well-used areas, it was just sort of a remote location, I would put a high-value item in there to incentivize people to come. In fact, here there's a lot of high-value items. Okay, another note about this map. It is the most complex map that I built for Half-Life Deathmatch. It was originally conceived to accommodate a survival type scenario where the grunts kept spawning and you had to fight them off as a team. So there are plenty of elements here that resemble a single player level, and there's also plenty of space or plenty of room for that fight to take place in. Later maps were designed purely for Half-Life Deathmatch until I got to Bootcamp and Crossfire, but we'll talk about those when we get to them. And look at this, because a single-player map doesn't have a ton of detail in it, you could invest in actual handrails, which was a real luxury to us level designers back in the day. I always like putting little holes in the ground in deathmatch levels so you can lay ambushes and stuff. Especially in Half-Life, we have trip mines and satchel charges. This is always a fun thing to do, to drop a satchel charge on this rail, and you can blow up anybody who is riding the train through here. So that's why I cut holes in the floor like that. Yeah, a lot of areas to fight the grunts in, which we never released. So let's take a look down here. I don't think I've been back here before. Ah, this is where you get the train. There we go. And the train is a very simplified version of the train because in deathmatch you don't really want encumbrances like things getting in your way, like that control stack and stuff. So it's a pretty flat train, but it does its job. Basically, it kills people it runs into. This area was inspired by On a Rail. This whole look, all of these textures, I took from that chapter because I thought, really liked the style. Okay, I think we have seen all of Subtransit now. Yep. So that's Subtransit. I'm now going to move to the next map, Snark Pit. So let's load that guy up. Okay, this is Snark Pit, which began life as DCDM3, which stood for Dario Kasalli Deathmatch Map number 3. That was built for Quake, and early on in the development of HLDM, I knew I wanted to port one of my Quake maps to Half-Life, and HLDM3 was voted in the team as the best candidate for that. So there is a really great video which shows the connection between the two maps, so I'm not going to really talk a massive amount of that. I'll just put a link to it down there, and you can take a look at that. So I started porting DCDM3 to Snark Pit on September 30th, 1998, and there is a funny story about this map. I'm going to see if I can find... Okay, here we are. It's kind of a long time ago now, but I believe in my Quake DM maps, I always put an area in the map with... You can see I'm going to no clip down here. Yeah, I always put an area of the map with blue light in it. And in that area would be some secret stuff, and there'd be a secret way to get in there that nobody else would know except me, the map author. In this case, I brought it across, and I have this little tube here, and I put some nice stuff in it. And I would have my own way of getting into that area, and it would be some sneaky combination of an invisible trigger and jumping and shooting somewhere, and honestly I don't remember how I did it. All I remember is I had been using that blue secret room for a little while. In fact, there was no grate there to begin with. It was just a solid concrete wall like this, so nobody would even know that there's something there. And it was halfway down this jump, so nobody would really know what was going on. Anyway, so when I did the secret combo of stuff, which is probably, I think it was actually over here somewhere, what would happen is this little piece of concrete would slide out of the way, and a ledge would pop out into this thing, and you would drop onto the ledge, and it would carry you into there and close the door behind you, and you'd be able to pick up all of the stuff. The only problem is I happened to be doing that combination here right when Chuck Jones happened to be jumping down this hole, and he dropped onto the ledge and was carried into the secret area, and of course then my whole trick was blown and people realized what I was doing. So instead of removing this idea completely, whoops, okay. So instead of removing this idea completely, we switched it so that I think there's a button here somewhere. Actually, I forget where the button is. It might be this one, where this grate now opens up and you can go pick up the stuff. So that was a pretty funny deathmatch day. I'll never forget that day of Chuck Jones blundering into my secret and then telling everybody what was going on. That was pretty funny. Anyway, so this was obviously named a Snark Pit because it had this basement area where I put a high value item, I believe. Yeah, all this ammo is pretty high value. Yes, here we go. High value item in the basement to incentivize people to come down here, and of course you just press this and down they go. Oh man. Yes, you don't even need the snarks, you just press the button. Pretty funny. Otherwise, this is exactly the same as DC DM3 for Quake. It's just repurposed some of the weapons, and it's it's using the same principles. Whatever was a high value item in Quake, I would replace that with a high value item in Half-Life. And then there was the trap here. I could drop anybody who's chasing you into the slime. And then of course to get to here you have to press, or I think you press this button, and you have to pay a little bit of time to get to the high value rocket launcher. Yeah, you have to wait here, and everybody can hear this bridge moving. So a lot of times I'll design a map, every single area has to have a reason for players to go there, either moving between one high value area to another, or wanting to visit that area for some reason. I never liked a map to be too big or labyrinthy or have too many corridors, because you would just end up not seeing many people. So all of my maps are designed to push people into the same space at the same time and get a lot of action happening. And you'll see the epitome of that is going to be in Crossfire, a little further into this video. Well, there we go. Now the snarks are available again. This is kind of a silly thing where you you can trap somebody here so they can't get out. This locks them in, and then you can throw grenades, and the grenades will fly back here with the fan and blow anybody else, or blow anyone up who happen to get caught in your trap. It's kind of difficult to actually execute this. It was kind of a cool idea. Okay, let's have a look at this whole map. Surprisingly small and simple. But you know what, with the player numbers we had back then, I didn't like making really big maps because I didn't want people spreading out too far. This, of course, all changed in Bootcamp, but I will talk about Bootcamp in a little bit. Alright, so this is pretty much it for Snark Pit. Let's move on to the next one, which is Undertow. Okay, this is Undertow. This is... I think this is the second map I ever worked on. Oh, the second deathmatch map I ever worked on. I think this was before I ported Snark Pit. This map was conceived of one mechanic, and one mechanic only, and that is this underwater flooding. So if I can just quickly, yeah, here we go. This area here was the entire reason this map exists, which is a giant vertical space which normally it's just a fun place to fight each other in. There's plenty of weapons in here, there's the long jump module. This is where I really wanted players to be. So then you can ride up here, and then you can do the hilarious trap of, if anybody's in there, you can drown them. There we go, and then the water rises all the way up here, and you die if you're in there. You drown slowly. I had to leave this closed for long enough for people to drown, so it stays closed for quite a long time, because it takes a long time to drown somebody in Half-Life. Alright, there we go. Opens up again. So this entire map was conceived because of that. And then everything else sort of just was little ideas as I was building out. Let's go out here. As I was building out the space, I just thought, okay, what else am I putting here? One was obviously the river that flows to that area, which is this thing here. And then it starts in a little bunker here. So this is a very, very straightforward and simple map. Everything serves this main... I think this pushes you along. Yeah, it's like a water slide. Pick this up on the way, and then down you go into the main area. This area is very straightforward. It's just a central area with a lot of verticality and corridors where you can pick up weapons that you want. I remember thinking this bunker was cool at the time, but I don't remember why. Oh, this is why. This is a timed door entry. There we go, rotating. Yeah, so that kept you safe in here for a little bit as you picked up your stuff. Very high value items here, grenades, and then you can get out. I don't know how cool that feature is, to be honest. It was something just occurred to me one day, and I thought, oh, you know, these are the days where you can just put something in that you thought of, and you know, have it done within hours, without overthinking it. Okay, let's move to the next one. I'm going to take a look at Bootcamp now. Okay, this one. I started working on this map May 13th, 1998. It was originally designed for a multiplayer game idea I really liked called Loot. So this map was designed for that game mode, which we never shipped. Essentially, the game mode was all players would start unarmed in a large warehouse space, all together in a large group in the same room. They wouldn't have anything, no melee weapons, nothing. The weapons were going to be scattered randomly throughout the map. They would spawn at different locations each time, so you couldn't memorize patterns of where you wanted to go to pick up what you wanted. And basically the game was players had to go find the weapons. They needed to kill each other, except because you didn't know where the weapons were going to be or what you would find, and you knew that everybody else was also running around looking for weapons, you pretty much had to use the weapon you first found rather than going for your favorite, because you don't know where your favorite's going to be. So that was a slight twist on basic deathmatch, where you would have to make do with what you had. The second twist is there was going to be, and this is why it was called loot, there was going to be a bag of loot in the map somewhere, and if you found it, you could run it back to the large square, which was here in fact. If you found the bag of loot, you would run it back to this large square and win the round. Otherwise, the last guy standing would win. Anyway, that was the idea, and this is the reason why these flagpoles are so high, so you can see them anywhere in the map, so you would know where to run the loot to. So pretty much everywhere you move in this map, you can see these flagpoles. So you go, oh, okay, I need to go in that direction. Like this. So this map breaks with my convention of wanting to keep things pretty small and tight so you always are around other players, simply because this map was built for that one particular game mode. So this map's original name was Loot 1, and it was completed October 14th, 1998. So it took me a long time to build, and I think it was one of the last ones I finished. So let's take a look around. So bearing in mind the idea for the loot gameplay, so essentially you would just be running around trying to hide from other people and hoping you would walk into a gun you really liked. And look at this, I got lucky and there are these two. Well, actually, you know, this map was released as an HLDM, so the spawn points don't vary, but in the original loot game they would have, and there's a reason to visit every last area of this map. And sort of get lost in the different spaces. Another reason why this map was designed to be so big is the loot. The bag of loot could have spawned anywhere in the map, and I didn't want a player who found the bag of loot to be able to win too quickly, just carrying it onto here. So the map had to be pretty big to encourage that sort of journey from picking up the loot to capturing it, which is kind of like a really early capture the flag meets battle royale or something, since nobody starts with weapons. Okay, this is Frenzy. This was the very first multiplayer map I built after shipping Half-Life, where Gabe came to me and said, hey, we need a map that can play well for a small number of players who have really shit internet connections. So it has to be extremely low detail and extremely tight quarters and fast-paced. So I started this map November 10th, 1998, and it was built in 3 days, and it was released, I think it was the first post-ship date release of Half-Life. So it's very, very small, and I think it might just be 2 areas. Yeah, look at this, the entire thing. In fact, let's get rid of you, and then have a look. Zoom out a little bit. Yeah, the entire thing is this central room, and it's sort of like a donut. And it's all, as you can see, extremely low detail and no sky. So it keeps things running as smoothly as possible. These corridors are literally, well, there's a little detail there, but pretty much that's the only thing. Everything was very rectilinear. So the other interesting thing about this map is this was when we were internally developing some new deathmatch models, so people could choose to not just be the standard ones that we released. And we never released this, but we had a Mr. T deathmatch model. So I'm going to show you a couple of screenshots of that. So there is Mr. T inside Frenzy, and I guess it looks like he's murdered a couple of Barneys. And that's Rabscuttle. That was Gabe's in-game name at the time, telling me to stand still and shoot so he could take screenshots of the great Mr. T model that we never released. Alright, so there's not much to say about this other than the same exact design principles that I talked about earlier they remain true here as well. Every area that you want to incentivize players to get to has a high value weapon in them, otherwise there's no reason to come up. There's some high ground, there are gaps in the floor so you can grenade people, surprise them, jump down on them, ambush them, stuff like that. Everything very simple, very few handrails in the map, just very, very simple. Alright, so let's move on to Crossfire. Okay, so here we are in Crossfire. I began working on this map December 1st, 1998. So because I already had the geometry from Half-Life 1, this area was adapted pretty quickly. This back area was built in the first day, and 5 days of work later this map was testable, so pretty much less than a week this map came together. And you can see it's pretty simple, there's not really much going on here, but it was just a rapid execution of a simple idea. I really, really love this map. Not just building it, but the idea that there was this additional layer over the top of regular Half-Life Deathmatch that hadn't been done before. I had done a handful of Deathmatch maps for Half-Life at this point, and I really wanted to try something different. I wanted the map to direct players more rather than being just a passive playground. Adding the bunker element gave the game different stages and opportunities for different moments and comical outcomes just by encouraging everybody in the game to go to the same place at the same time. It's a really, really simple concept, but it really works. You know, a lot of the magic and fun and silliness happens in Deathmatch just because people are in the same place at the same time. It was the exact same concept that underpinned Dust Bowl in TFC and subsequently Gold Rush and Payload in TF2, which if you think about it, all of those maps, they just incentivize the players to be in the same place at the same time. And there's some other stuff going on in those other maps, of course, like the attack, defend, pushes and stuff, but that cart, the Payload in TF2, is just a magnet for players to be in the same place at the same time, and this Deathmatch map started that. I wanted a reason for everybody to rush this bunker and try to get in here at once as soon as the alarms turned on, and that would guarantee utter carnage and chaos. So that was the idea for this map, and it was spawned by the fact that we had these two towers in Half-Life 1, and if we added cannons to them, we could shoot the players who were desperately trying to scramble into this bunker and cross this deadly open space here. There were tons of tactics that would emerge in this map as soon as the alarms sounded and people started panicking and making their way to the towers or the bunker. You could come out here and you could snark everybody who is trying to run to the bunker. You could sit here and snipe them off as they're running across, and when things were safe, then you could make your way across there. You could run into these towers and then snipe them with the cannons, or you could run into here and snipe people as they were trying to cross this open area. So there are a lot of things you could do when this alarm went off. The only way to make this work was to create an event where everybody would die if they were outside of those doors. Okay, so when the alarm goes off, these doors move very slowly. And these doors were deliberately designed as a visual timer so that players could see how much time they had left to pick off and squabble amongst each other before you actually get into the bunker itself. Half-Life Deathmatch always had instant respawn, so that means it doesn't really matter who dies in the open, but that's not really the point. The point is that you managed to live while everybody else managed to die all in the same point. And the funny thing was that if you did kill somebody on their way across here to the bunker, they get to respawn and have another attempt at it. And that really put people into a panic. If you die on your way to the bunker and you get another chance at it, then you just, like, the adrenaline's just going. You would be a lot more careless than usual, and you would just wade in there without really thinking about it because you really wanted to get into that door. And that style of gameplay was completely the opposite of the hunt and camp gameplay I disliked so much in Deathmatch. So let's go to the back half of this map. So this was the area that was built first, And then I realized, okay, so I need an area that people would spawn in. So nobody spawns in this half of the map because that makes it too easy to get to the bunker. I wanted an area where people would spawn in, gather up their weapons, have a really good time fighting. So all of these different levels and rooms have to play to the strengths of the weapons. And then when these bunkers go green, it's time to hit the button and then change the action to trying to get to the bunker. So this area it serves a very specific purpose, and that's why it's kind of clean, not overly complicated, but it has enough vertical space and different rooms to accommodate all of the weapons and all of the spawn points in the map. This staging ground was kept small deliberately, so it forced players to have to fight their way to the bunker, and it was quite difficult, especially if you were unarmed and you just spawned, because we don't really want people who are unarmed being able to easily get to the bunker on the other side. So it was very difficult to get out of this area, even to get to the bunker side. So you'd feel like you've accomplished something getting out of here and getting across to the bunker to call in the airstrike. These walls are all deliberately thin for Gauss gun kills, and weapons were always placed to keep people moving. Okay, now we have to talk about something that I got a million emails about back in the day. Here we are. I started talking about these sections in Snark Pit, where in Quake I would build a room that had a blue light in it, and it had all the good stuff that you'd want, and there'd be some secret way to get into there. This also existed in Crossfire right up until we shipped it. I went home for Christmas to the UK, and then it was decided to be released while I was gone, and John Guthrie came and did the final shipping pass on it. He saw this room and he thought, oh my god, what is this room? So he left the room as it was with the stuff in it, but he removed access to the room. So in other words, there's a door here still, but there's no way to get in here. There used to be a secret way to get in there, but there is no way to get that door moving. And the reason the room was left in but the access was disabled is because we don't like to make many changes to a map right before shipping. So I think this was an entity-only change where he just unhooked the logic from opening that door. So this room exists, but you can't get into it, and that's why you can't get into it, and that's why the room exists at all. I really, really love playing this map. There are just so many different ways to experience this map, and I really do love the phase change that happens when somebody hits that button. I had mad fights inside this bunker. I really enjoyed defending the tower here, because you're always vulnerable to sniper fire, but if you keep shooting these windows here, generally players are so panicked on their way up here, they're not really good at hitting people in the towers, but as soon as you finish, you drop down, you defend the bunker in a mad final rush. A lot of people have died while healing up here with a dart or two in the back. Crossfire is pretty much what I lived for as a multiplayer map designer. It was a novel idea. The execution was really fun to playtest, and finding the kinds of outcomes that could happen just based on a couple of simple ideas with a simple execution was incredibly rewarding. So this was by far my favorite Half-Life deathmatch map to build and to play. And that brings us to the very last map I'm going to talk about in this video, which is the hill. So let's load that up. Okay, the hill. This was built very rapidly for PC Gamer in February 1999. They wanted an original deathmatch map, so we put their logo on the floor here, and this was one of those very simple single concept design maps where I really wanted just a massively vertical space which tapers the higher you got. So you would always want to climb as high as possible using Gauss jumps or these ladders, and once you got to the top, it was really easy to rain down hell on everybody down on lower levels, and you had all you need up here with all these respawning things to stay alive and be a complete nuisance, including throwing snarks on these poor people down in the bottom. So the real fun of this map is using the Gauss gun to jump up higher much quicker than you would use the ladders, and just using the verticality of everything to rain down death from people who hadn't quite made it all the way up as far as you had. We had a lot of really fun games in this map back in the day, but it really, it sort of sunk into obscurity because it was not part of the original release or even part of an official Valve release, I think. But sure has some pretty colors to it. And again, all of the weapons are placed very particularly. The harder it is to get to the weapon, the more high value the weapon it is. This Gauss gun is left on the ground because it's used to jump up from one level to another. So all we have to do is to jump through this teleporter, get here, pick up this gun, and then you can head up. And once you're up, you just see people running around down here, and you can drop satchel charges on them, grenades, snarks. It's pretty fun. I really like this map, and I was bummed that it wasn't in a sort of a wider release with a lot more people playing it, because it was really enjoyable at the time. Well, that is a quick tour through the multiplayer maps that I worked on in Half-Life. And I believe the hill was the last. I also worked on Doublecross, which was an attempt to rebuild Crossfire, but a little more sophisticated. But I was never as happy with Doublecross as I was with Crossfire. I think the original just nailed the formula, and the remake of it complicated that a little too much. So it never really captured the essence of the first map. Okay, and this is Doublecross. This was my attempt at rebuilding Crossfire and making it better. And I learned a pretty great lesson from this attempt. Crossfire was succeeding in its own right, but I thought there were some parts of it that I could improve, both visually and flow. And I was wrong about the second one. In fact, I made it a lot worse. And I'm going to talk about where I think I went wrong with this map. The single biggest problem with Doublecross is the very existence of Crossfire, which got this formula better. So why is that? So when I look at this, one thing I did is I made the entire map wider. You can see there's a little bit of space between this bunker and the walls, and over here the walls actually go out a little bit both sides. And so this whole area in here is wider, but crucially there isn't a sort of a square in the middle where everybody can come together naturally from their spawn points. It's a lot more convoluted, and let me show you what I'm talking about. So this area, all of the spawn points are here, which is the same as in Crossfire, but the problem is this is a much wider space. So people who are spawning over here really aren't concerned about people who are over there, which is not the case in Crossfire. In Crossfire, everybody is together, they're all spawning, they're all within firing distance, and they're all pretty close. This, we are spread out way too far. Another big problem here is I actually started this back area by building this area here with the bridge across it and the moat, because I thought this was a really cool look. But it just doesn't work with gameplay because you don't have a continuous flat ground here. Nobody really wants to jump in here because you're really disadvantaged, and you're not part of the same fight that's going on up there or going on over there. You just sort of run away from the fight, which Crossfire didn't really allow you to do unless you managed to get out of that pit and into this side of the map. So unfortunately, even though I built these spaces with the same style as Crossfire, the same wall thickness and everything, I put these buildings too far apart. That building there is too far from this building here. And this building here, really, it has one way in and out, but doesn't have any verticality to it or anything like that. So it doesn't really add anything to this central fight area. This is all self-contained and interior. So as a result, this area just is not anywhere near as fun as Crossfire's back area. A couple of other things that I feel didn't work here were this vantage point here. You are vulnerable to cannon fire, which is great, and you can hop out of this window to get there, which is great, but there really is only one way in, and that's through this area, which you can't access from the backside. You have to get here through this sort of convoluted interior space, and this is when people just are away from the action. So you didn't get a sense of always being part of this mad fight until you get to the bunker side. You were sort of isolated over here. I think that's a problem. I also don't think that this bunker was as well designed as the one in Crossfire. It's just too segregated. The cannons, I think, are actually an improvement because they're aimed from the top and you don't get the barrel in your way. But this area here where you can defend from is sort of cut off from everywhere else. There's only one way up and down, and it's this ladder here, whereas the other, in Crossfire, they were actually connected to this front, this sort of lobby area, which meant there was a little bit more danger involved there. With this, you can't really get in, sneak up behind this guy in any kind of timely fashion whatsoever, because you have to go deep inside the bunker to get there first. So the re-engineering I did with the spaces, I think I just complicated matters in the bunker area, and the expansion of this back area did not serve the player number well at all. It just resulted in players not really interacting with each other back here. I mean, there was the left side and the right side, and then there was this completely separated off interior space here. And also when you jump in there, there's really no coming back. I mean, you can jump out of here again, but it's 2 jumps and you're too slow, you're always going to get hit. So yes, I should have spent any time that I thought Crossfire needed on that map instead of clean sheeting this one. But it was still fun to build. Part of what I really like about building deathmatch maps is just a clean sheet and coming up with new ideas and new spaces and new themes and twists on old themes and old spaces. All of that's just so much fun. The creative process of that is just incredible. So I enjoyed building it, but I could never quite capture the spirit of the original. So that ends this video. I hope it's been interesting for you, and thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.